right, so our first speaker is Levon Sharrow. Levon just flew in from LA, and boy, are his arms tired. He's not from LA originally, well, Ventura. He lives in Ventura, not LA, I should make that clear. Originally from London, Ontario, the other London. And you'll have seen on the website, you've seen a profile picture with a very good doggo. That is his companion, Norm. Norm is a very good doggo. A Brussels Griffon is the breed, I am told. Anyway, Levon works at Patagonia. Something of, if I worked at Patagonia, I would not only be proud of it, I think I'd be downright smug about it. And that is obviously a big influence on the talk we're going to hear today. Levon is here to talk about design for people and planet. I want you to give a big, big welcome to Levon Sharrow.
Thank you. Just first want to say thanks for having me here. It's my first time in Scotland, and pretty amazed by this city as a person who, gets to travel and experience the world through my particularly unique perspective. It's nice to see people in places that are different all the time. So these monitors are kind of flickering in and out, so I'm going to do my best. But yeah, I'm here to talk about design for people and planet. And when I talk about that, I mean, it's reframing our purpose as designers through ethics, values, personal experience that essentially lead us to create more positive impact in society. So I'll talk a little bit about where I came from, where I'm at now, and a little bit of a case study where all this connects to me and people and planet. First up, a disclaimer. It's pretty long, don't have to read it, but I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of photography in here. So our photo team is a huge part of the brand. So I just want to say thank you to them for anything that's included in here. I'm also using some typefaces by independent designers. So I always like to say shout out to those people. Always support independent design. I'm not a public speaker. I am not a motivational speaker, but I really love design, and I really enjoy people, connecting with others, and especially through events like this and opportunities to get to know other people's path towards a career in this field. So first up, who the heck am I and how the heck are you? I am Levon. I grew up in Canada, as mentioned. Here's an old photo of me from way back when. Lately, I'm turning 39 this year, and I started to think a lot about why did I join this path? Like, why did I take on this type of work? I'm definitely not a person that can draw. I'm not a person that can build anything, but I really experience the world in a way that I think is, it connects to the way that design works. So I've identified different paths that I can use that. So I like to think of myself as not really a graphic designer, not really an art director, not a creative director, not a user experience designer. I'm more of an infinitely curious feeler with access to design tools. I wonder how many people here feel that way about themselves. I've gone the gamut of working in Quark and InDesign and all of these different tools. They seem to switch out every couple of years. And I'm fairly agnostic to what they do, so long as they connect to communicating ideas and other ways to actually bring thought to people. A little bit of a digression here. My first foray into user experience is through hopping on motorcycles as a child. I grew up with fairly liberal hippie parents that just let me do what I needed to do. Not a lot of protection, even though my mom's off on the side there, worried on the right. That's kind of who I am. I like to learn by experience, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So, kind of a question for the crowd here is, what shaped you? Something I think about a lot recently. Why are you here? Where did you come from? I'm very curious. I know I'm not going to get answers now. But it's something I'd like to know of people, because I think each of us has a unique experience in the world and connection to the world around us that isn't necessarily for, I don't want to be controversial here, but like working towards capitalism and being like a production person who just does whatever a company needs them to do. I think it's important to think about who you are in the mix of the world and what impact you can have. It's not something that I started out being aware of, because I think I don't come from a lot of wealth or means. So work started as a means of survival and just being able to support myself. But as my career has gone on, I've learned that there are other avenues beyond survival where you can connect your passions and your purpose to the work that you do. So going back to who I am and why I'm here, sorry, the monitor went out. I immerse myself to understand and expand my via curiosity. I'm going to say that a million times. Curiosity is what drives everything for me. Theoretical or instruction manuals are great. It's a nice reference material, but there's nothing better to me than truly like engaging in whatever you're trying to learn about. A good example of this is I used to work on a fairly niche industries, and it was interesting that I couldn't rely on just the materials that were provided. I wanted to actually engage in the experiences. So for example, working for a trucking tire company in the past on an advertising campaign, I actually got to sit in trucks and understand their world, and sort of like an area that I was not familiar with at all. It's that immersion that I'll talk a little bit about later on with Patagonia as well. So just another quick foray into user experience here. So another part of what shaped me is exposure to human rights and advocacy that came pretty early. So my family on my mom's side grew up in Albania. I'm not sure if anybody here is from Albania, but they're historically at the time, my cousins were leaving the country due to a genocidal war, and when they made it to Canada, my mom was the first person, and my dad, to take in a lot of my cousins, set them up for success in a new country without a lot of means at the same time. My mom was also an ESL teacher, so English as a second language for refugees that newly arrived in Canada, and she used to bring me into her classes and just sit there. At that time, I was like 5, 6, 7 years old. I was exposed to just new cultures and new experiences of people, and it just made me curious again. So I think about that a lot when I'm considering the user experiences, that everybody's perspective is different and their perception is shaped by their experience as well. So you have to be mindful of that. And it's something that I carry through in the work that I do. I try to, as much as possible. Another aspect that shaped me is I've always felt I'm a part of nature and not apart from it. I impact it, it impacts me. I think that there's a lot that I found early on in my life through growing up in Canada, where there is a lot of green space and you don't have a lot of money. You form a bond with things like nature that make you appreciate it in different ways. And I think about that a lot. Anecdotally, my partner's here, she'll attest to, a couple days ago we had I think it was a black widow spider or something, and rather than smashing it out, we grabbed a piece of paper and took it outside, and that's a common occurrence for me. I just don't feel right about feeling above nature or feeling above anything at all, so it's nice to be a part of it and think about that. A little bit about where I grew up. This is another bit of that relationship with nature. A lot of people think about Canada as this green space, but there's also a chemical valley that is, due to industrialization from oil refineries and just massive production. So it was interesting to see the landscape and, pretty common juxtaposition of people at play outside with smokestacks behind them. It's something that I've come to experience in LA as well, since like moving to California, that this exists in a lot of areas where there's this weird position that people are in where they're living somewhere, but they're living among, pollution, and that impacts them. And so I think about how does this connect to me choosing to be a designer, values, ethics, experiences, and imagination. Like a lot of it is tied up in how I think about the world based on how I've experienced it, but how I can stay true to the things that I care about when there are challenging moments where, it's not the priority to care about the environment and it's the priority to make money. There's an interesting spot where there's a lot of self-reflection and conversation to be had. So I'm going to jump into Patagonia. How many people here, with a show of hands, have heard of Patagonia? That blows my mind. I was walking yesterday and we noticed people with a jacket, and I noted that to my partner. I still don't know the scale of it because we're very small. And another part of that is this is the original founding group. Right in the center there with the S is Levon Sharrow, founder of Patagonia, who recently gave up the company. I don't know if anybody has heard of that, but pretty wild, pretty remarkable human being that I found my connection to Patagonia through the book, Let My People Go Surfing. I didn't grow up with a lot of the products and exposure to that, let alone being able to afford it. So the book came into my life later on, and it was this sentence here, or I should say mission, purpose. Sorry, I'm going to go back. There we go. The original purpose statement from 1973 up until 2018 was build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, and use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. That's a pretty lofty thing to, try to solve through a clothing company. I think there's a lot in there that just those few words that resonated so heavily with me conceptually after working in like 4 organizations where that might not have been the purpose. And so a few years ago, the founders decided to shorten that up, tighten that up, and make it a lot more direct, because there were some things in the previous mission statement or purpose statement that may have gotten in the way of the mission, which is saving our home planet, or at least being part of the collective movement to care about it and do things about it. So again, sometimes at work we think about what is the experience of someone in the outdoors and their tie-in with sport. And then other times it's about commerce, and other times it may be about environmentalism. But the point being, there's always something to consider, whether it's the person or the planet. So one thing I want to note is that at Patagonia, UX isn't necessarily in the foreground. It's pretty quiet. We're a team of 4 people in an organization where a lot of times when we talk to other brands, they're teams of like 40 people. And it's a bit funny because we wear quite a few hats. But the fun thing is that we're able to bring that design detail in a platform like digital or experiences, for example, obsessing over button radiuses and whatnot. But it's more about how our work ties in with the overall purpose. So just a little quick photo. I'm not sure if anyone's ever seen this. This is a textiles and discarded clothing desert in Chile. And this is the kind of thing that you see these photos and you see and you hear about the impact For example, 92 million tons of textile waste is created yearly by the clothing industry. And to me as a designer, that's, I'm not designing the products, but being part of the company that does, I think that's a pretty big problem statement. When you're approaching things like more broadly, it's a question of whether people are aware of that. So how do you encourage quality over quantity? There's this notion of like being able to sell something, but also help people understand the impact of what they're actually buying. If it's a jacket, what is it made of? How did it make its way here? And this is a little slide that shows what we call Footprint Chronicles, or now it's our impact, which was spearheaded years ago in the early 2000s, but refreshed in 2018, was relaunched, which connects people with the supply chain transparency and tangible material impact information. Patagonia is not really high tech in the sense of technology, but when it comes to material innovation, for example, making clothing out of discarded bottles and other materials, repurposing fabrics, the way that patterns are made and thought of, there's a considerable amount of technology and innovation there, but it's not the kind of high-tech performance innovation. So it's important to think about how we tell that story and how that connects to the overall purpose, and how it connects back to a pile of clothing in Chile that ended up there for some unknown reason. Just a couple of slides here, just showing a little bit more of that language around provoking people to think about what's in their closet when buying, from the decisions you make when you're actually shopping, where you're shopping from. What do you know about where your stuff is from? Because 85% of clothing ends up in landfills or gets incinerated. And that's a fact, and that's pretty tough to overcome, because we're in a consumption-based society. We live in capitalism, right? It's something that we're all, I imagine we're all impacted by. But if we're living in it, how do we move from consumption to ownership? There's a relationship with the things that we have, and I think probably less so here, more so where I live now. Getting new stuff is exciting. Like getting the greatest, freshest iPhone is awesome. You have to stay on top of things. But when it comes to, what you buy, moving beyond that idea of like needing more things and just keeping what you have and really appreciating it and like keeping it in play for a long time. Quick photo of some repaired shorts. This leads me into worn wear. How many people are familiar with worn wear or have heard of it? See, that makes me sad. Only 2 people. But we'll change that. Worn wear began as a blog started by Keith and Lauren Malloy in 2012. And that was essentially just a place to have people communicate their stories about the products, the rips, tears, patches, and stains that recall treasured outdoor memories. Quoting my coworker and mentor, Casey Krasnowski. And it's the kind of idea of which is captured in this picture, is that you can pass things down too. You don't need to get rid of them. If you have a family, if you have, we all know people that have hand-me-downs. It's not a new idea, but I think it's lost its luster a little bit over the years. So I think this is an area where that blog alone from 2 people inspired the company to expand its repair service into the largest garment repair facility in North America. They also made a repair truck out of reclaimed materials. This is designed by Jay Nelson. I'll show you up in a minute. So that a small team could travel around the country repairing clothing for free. Not just Patagonia clothing, but all clothing. So if you show up at one of these events and you have ripped pants, or in my case, Usually it's my shirts, the elbows blow out. You take it to them and they'll repair it for free. We also have a used clothing store online, wornwear.com. Since 2 people here only raised their hands, I'd encourage everyone to check that out. It's not yet available all over Europe, but it's definitely going to start picking up. This is that repair vehicle. So pretty beautiful. It's an old truck too. It has a name. I can't remember right now. It's like Barbara or something like that. But it's that kind of like old school tech, showing up again. Reclaimed materials, old truck, not high tech, but it does the job. And so part of Wornwear is encouraging people through commerce to, while they're on that path of considering things, gather your gear, trade it in, and we'll give you credit for something new. We take that and then resell that to someone else who hopefully takes that on to the next, its next round of stories. And just to back that up with a little bit more data, extending the life of clothing by an extra 9 months instead of buying new can reduce carbon waste and water footprints by roughly 20 to 30% each. I think these are good metrics to think of that I never had thought of before. What can we do to keep our impact down? It's not necessary to throw things away and replace them all the time. And that's just another thing is in my opinion, used things are pretty beautiful. The imperfection and longevity of something is more appealing to me than opening a plastic bag and getting something new and putting it on. I think it's really nice to have patches on things, and it tells a bit of a story. And so as experienced designers, we're continuously thinking, testing and iterating on ways to connect people with context or guidance related to their relationship with clothing. Maybe you don't need something new. Maybe you need us to repair it, or if we can't repair it, maybe we can show you how. So we're investing in, guidance and tutorials on how you can actually just repair your stuff. There's a big movement on right to repair. I'm not sure if that's a thing here. But in the U.S., it's becoming somewhere along the ways to being a proposed law for certain companies to be able to repair your stuff. I think that's really important. Circularity is what I'm hinting at here. So I'm going to move a little bit into the design side of things and what inspires a lot of the work that we do. So this is the first catalog cover from Chouinard Equipment Company. Patagonia actually started as an offshoot of that. So there was first hard goods for climbing and then started to slowly make its way into what they called software at the time, which is kind of funny. So more soft goods. But when they started to get into more clothing, the emphasis was on creating clothing that mirrored the values or principles of the physical products. So things having less impact, and a bit of the design ethos attributed to Yvonne. Good design is as little design as possible. We've also heard that from Dieter Rams, big hero of mine. And I'm a big believer and proponent of this. And so when we think about that physical side, how do those product principles inspire our UX principles? So going back to that story about transitioning from hard climbing goods to soft goods, clean climbing was that notion that if you're a climber and you're going to climb a wall, there was a better way to not create scarring on the side of that wall. So Yvonne actually invented a better component to climb that actually leave no mark on the face of the wall. So reducing the impact to the environment in the process. And that actually revolutionized climbing and the perspective of climbers from the notion that, you shouldn't actually do things to produce things cheaper so that people buy them, but produce the things that they may need to create less impact doing the things that they love. So jumping into the physical side, there are principles that, these are questions, again, that were established by Levon around the product principles. So some of them, this isn't the full list, believe it or not, but this is most of it. And I'm curious if you think this applies to the work that you do. Is it functional? Is it multifunctional? Is it durable? Is it repairable? Does it fit our customer? That's important. Is it as simple as possible? Is it an innovation or an invention? Is it easy to care for and clean? Is it authentic? Those are really good things to ask yourself, I think, when you're putting something out there in the world. And not something that everybody follows, and not necessarily saying they should, but to me, they're good principles that I've been able to apply in other areas of this work. So translating that into a bit more of our design language, we took an opportunity to translate that to the digital side. So for us, is it honest? Is it essential? Is it unobtrusive? Is it captivating? Is it multi-purpose? Is it accessible? These are questions about the experiences that we build, because it's not necessarily about coercion. It's about context and guidance, and being honest and true with people in the design that you lay out there is important, as well as what's essential, going back to as little design as possible. We really try to pare things down and make it about either the story, or what some people call content now, or the product itself. And so although we appreciate the innovation of, I'm losing slides again, the innovation of technology and trends in the wild, there's a strong foundation of historical analog principles that guide our design decisions, largely through ethics inspired by better outcomes for people and planet. It's good to note that our founder doesn't own a computer or a cell phone. He actually just has a hard landline in his office, and it's kind of funny to see that. That's just a constant daily reminder when you walk into the offices that innovation can take on many forms. It doesn't necessarily have to mean the newest and latest. And beyond some, more of the product work or commercial work or sales, we also do things that are a little bit more disruptive or thought-provoking in the space of environmental awareness. Years ago, I think it was in 2019, the president at the time made some declarations about public lands, that they were going to sort of reduce their size so that they could mine and create businesses around more extractive industries in a place called Bears Ears in Utah. And I would encourage everyone to look up Bears Ears, Patagonia, to check that out. But essentially, we went to bat at one point and communicated out to the world that this is something that's happening right now. The president's stealing your land, and I don't think anybody at that time really knew that was all happening or what the implications were. So we really wanted to elevate the notion that it's something that you can speak up against. And I would, again, encourage you to look into that as a case study. It's far too rich and deep to cover today. But one that I'd like to get into is the Blue Heart of Europe. I'll try to speed it up here. Who's familiar with the Vjosa River in Albania? Anyone? No. Okay, so it's known as the Blue Heart of Europe. It's actually a really beautiful place. I've never been there. I hope to go one day. But this is what some parts of the area look like. Not that great. Something I learned a lot about through Patagonia is that, hydropower development and dams really do destroy the culture and ecology of places where they exist. So I don't know anything about dams or that, what goes into the planning and proposals of them, but it's definitely something that was happening at the time where 3,000 dams is a lot for an area that really is reliant on both the ecology, wildlife, and resources there. If you're coming in and establishing a bunch of these big dams where they divert river systems, you're disrupting a lot of people's lives, including the animals and wildlife that lives there. So working alongside a coalition of NGOs, we joined the fight in 2018 to raise global awareness of the issues and impacts. So this gets us out of our comfortable seat of making quality gear and into more of this notion of there's the planet, there's more than just the people, there's the river systems that bring life. So the work that we did was an immersive and accessible experience that illustrates how destructive dams could be to ecosystems. There was also a film that is really beautiful. I would encourage everyone to check it out. It's on YouTube. If you find our YouTube channel and search Blue Heart, you'll find it. But the objective was really to make lots of people care about a far-off river. I think that's a good design challenge or communication challenge. And as part of a multi-layered campaign, we built out a really cool experience. I would also encourage you to check it out, blueheart.patagonia.com. And some of the things that we were able to do was leveraging public records of these proposed dams. We used GIS mapping data to plot out and visualize where these dams are to show the sheer scale of proposed and existing dams in the region, to give people from far away a notion of how truly littered this area would be with extractive projects. And so in partnership with ecologists, environmental scientists, photographers, and writers, we elevated that story. And it kind of connected me back to that idea of immersion and how I learn, and being able to interface with scientists to ask them big, broad questions about what this meant to the areas. I read it on paper and I still want to go there, but I was able to ask deeper and probably dumber questions of very smart people that allowed me to understand how to communicate and bring this story to life. So on June 13th, last year, the Albanian government signed a memorandum of understanding with Patagonia to designate the Vjosa River as a wild river national park. So this year, the protection of the river was signed into law. The Vjosa and 3 of its main tributaries are now protected forever. So that's the work of a lot of people. It's not just work that our team did or the website or whatever, but it was a combination of being able to communicate that story that resulted in the protection of a river in Albania where a good deal of my family comes from. It really connected to who I am, where I am, and hopefully reinforces that I'm on the right path. So I'm jumping ahead here. Massive thank you to DIBI and everyone here. This has been really fun. Like I said, I'm not a motivational speaker, but I hope some of this resonated with you and made you think about your own path in design or research or development, anything related to that. And I also want to have a quick shout out to my team. As I mentioned, team of 4 and Norm. These people are all incredible, and I feel really lucky to be able to work with them every day alongside all of our partners. But it's the people that really make it happen. So it's something I like to think about as well. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Levon. Well, congratulations on halting the construction of those dams. Hydropower is a renewable energy source. What's the alternative?
It's a good question. I think it's hydroelectric dams was part of it. Not necessarily wind power or solar, but the proposed dams themselves were more like standard old school river diversion.
Yep, renewable resource.
Renewable. And so I think the alternative, I couldn't answer that with an honest answer other than knowing that 3,000 dams in one area that actually scarred the land, diverts the rivers, is not necessarily the best option for the people living there. And the 3,000, it's good to note too, a lot of those dams are proposed by out of country. So mining and extractive resourcing companies that would profit for their countries, but not necessarily for Albania.
Would you rather fossil fuels?
Definitely not.
How about nuclear?
I'm not sure.
Okay. What's your wavering on nuclear?
I don't know. I've read mixed things about nuclear power, but I'm not as well versed in it. So something I should look into though.
I think a lot of environmentalists are somewhat hypocritical when it comes to nuclear. And being against nuclear and fossil fuels and everything basically is.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I think everything has a. There are sometimes gray areas, and there's not such a hard distinction.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things. Is like it's about prioritization. It's like, okay, well, we don't want these dams, but we don't. You almost want to have a priority of
Right.
best to worst case scenario.
Right.
Probably going to be in the middle, which made me think of your principles as well. Okay, so anyone who was here last year saw me give a whole talk on design principles. I'm a total nerd for design principles, and those look like good principles. Can tell you're a fan of Dieter Rams and his great 10 principles, but I often feel what's missing is prioritization. Like
Right.
you've got those questions which are great, but is there a question you'd put at the top? Is essential the number one question, or is
Functional.
functional? That's the one.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Because I think of it this way, it's like if you do everything else, but it doesn't actually work and it falls apart,
Right.
then you're not actually connecting. You're not communicating. It doesn't, there's no foundation for it to build from if you're only focusing on like, is it beautiful?
Yeah.
Is it these other less, probably more tangible things than like, does it actually work?
Yeah.
Did the door open?
I would love to see you order those, put
Yes.
those into an order list. So that brings up a good point. Talking about sometimes you know that terrible feeling when you're designing something and you're designing at the wrong scale. Like you're trying to make this thing look good, and actually, does this thing need to even exist?
Right.
I wonder, do you ever get that feeling about things like thinking about the individual carbon footprint? I mean, the idea of the individual carbon footprint was an invention of British Petroleum.
Yep.
And something more like the right to repair, where you bring it to the level of politics and you're introducing legislation, that feels more like solving a problem at the right scale.
Right.
But yeah, what scale of problem do you like to work at?
I think to me it's like I do think there is, the emphasis and onus on people to be the answer, right? Like when it's really like, how am I going to have less of an impact than a huge extractive industry? Like, I think it's a little bit more of awareness, like, and collectivism around what you're contributing to versus like, are you adding to the problem? Are you adding fuel to the fire, or are there other means? I've seen a lot of, over the past few years, like sustainable is a thing, right? And there's nothing really that sustainable about it other than the word, or that they used recycled materials. And even that in and of itself, recycling is a bit of a fabrication of the industry around plastics and petroleum. Like, it's not something that you want to stand on a ledge and say like recycling is everything you need to do, because that doesn't really actually solve it. I think the way it's like going deeper in this notion of like, do we need new stuff constantly or not? It's that scale, I think, of like, it's a shift for me when I bought things without really thinking about it, and I didn't even think about the repair of it. But now I'm all in. You know, I bought a sewing machine. I watched the tutorials. Like, it's something that is like more personal than this bigger, I'm gonna solve the planet by having a patch on my pants. It's more of a philosophical thing that I think may not connect to the world's on fire right now. But if I can, you know, just by being and encouraging, I think it puts a seed in people to think about it more than just being passive in what they do.
Yeah. Would you have any advice for someone who's in a situation? I guess most people here work in the digital sphere, but the same principle applies, like making stuff that doesn't really need to exist. If you find yourself in that situation where you're working on something and you do realize this really probably shouldn't exist in the first place, most companies aren't going to respond well to, you know, being
Yeah.
that stick in the wheel, saying, I don't think we should be building this. You know, you get known as the negative person, the person who says no.
I think that's something I can relate to. Back to values and ethics, I think there are times when I definitely feel in my particular position that there is an emphasis on conversion. And conversion means we did sell something new and we did pack it up in a slip and it did get shipped away to someone and they did return it to us because it was the wrong size and then they bought another one. And that keeps me up a little bit because I think that's a behavior we've all become accustomed to. So I think, yeah, it's a daily thing where I'm like, what about this? What about this?
So even at Patagonia, it's all about the metrics.
I mean, there's metrics, but it's an expansion of what those metrics
Right.
are.
You look
right?
at alternative numbers.
Yeah, alternative numbers. Like a good example was in like our returns data is something that we leverage a lot. That's our big design problem this year is size and fit. Like it's a commerce problem where people have done this like bracketing type of shopping where they buy multiple sizes. Mm-hmm. And so what can we do via our platforms to ensure they're picking the right thing for them? They're aware of what it's made of and why it's the right fit, and we're communicating that. And that later on down the path when they need to, you know, fix it, they can. If they can't, we have a repair facility. Do they know that? Do they know that when it's actually end of life, we can take it in and potentially resell it? It sounds like we have a bit of work to do there based on the audience, but I think it's that like notion of like creating a new relationship and sparking that dialogue versus just being passive about what's happening in commerce.
I mean, it's a proper design challenge. It's behavior change, is
Yes,
what I'm talking about.
exactly.
That gets to the heart of design. I mean, I guess behavior change is also at the heart of the stories, right? Because it feels like to me there's a theory, a hypothesis underlying the stories you're telling, like the supply chain transparency. That is, if you give people the data, tell the story, you know, that will encourage behavior change. But I don't know, looking at the history of, you know, other environmental movements like Greenpeace, that was their strategy for a long time as well. And it turns out, you know, even when people know full well what's going on, it doesn't necessarily translate to behavior change.
I would agree. You know, like there are some people that it will mean something to. There are some people that you need, you know, like we make clothing that is, some jackets are like $400. I grew up and I couldn't afford a $400 jacket, but does that mean that I can't have less of an impact if I can't buy the thing that is made of the best for our materials from our planet? So I shop at Goodwill. You know, that's also an alternative. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there. And I think about that like constantly. Like it's not, if I had, you know, a proposal my way, it would be like, how do we make this notion like of keeping your stuff, modifying it for your needs, and empowering, like actually like pick up a thing and fix it, or like trade your clothing around. I think there's a lot more value in that, but it doesn't necessarily create capital. Yeah. So that's a bit of a
value,
challenge.
but not capital. Yeah.
Yes.
Where'd you get that shirt?
Patagonia.
Okay. How long have you had it for?
I've had it since I started there about 6 years ago.
Nice. That
Yeah.
holds up well.
Yeah.
I'm,
Good stuff.
I want to see if anyone else. Oh, we got a hand straight up here. Someone's very eager. There we go.
So thanks for the talk. Amazing. I think most of us are usually trying to expand the teams that we are part of. And I'm quite curious, in a team of 4, to the scale that you're working at, how do you get your voice to be represented? And maybe if you can expand a bit on the ways that you're doing research and you're building stuff in order to make sure that they are to the values of the organization and of the team as well. Thank you.
That's a really good question. The shortest answer is like a lot of user feedback. We use platforms where, like, of course, there's a lot of momentum internally from an organization like Patagonia that we're saying the right thing, we're doing the right thing, we've done the due diligence. But then there's the other side of how is it being received? What's the feedback? And so there's like, back to like the emphasis on metrics, like we do look at sales and things like that, and that becomes a motivator or a signal for certain things. But the way that we bring it up to I would say like have a voice is through that experimentation and immediate feedback from users. Like, do they understand the terminology we're using, and sharing those videos back internally? It's a bit uncomfortable. It's a little bit uncomfortable and jarring, I think. So I think that at times it's seen as like we're challenging the notion or assumptions that are happening. But it's team of 4 people. It's kind of funny because the whole organization is very like user-centric, but not necessarily in all disciplines. So we're kind of like reaching back to our roots of feedback. And what did we do? Did they get it? Can we improve it? And to me, that's done, and the way we're doing it is, again, through like, this is what people think. This is what they're experiencing. Here's how and it's literally video, right? Like user testing is a tool we use. There's a few out there. And then research, we partner with our internal research team as well. That's amazing. And they're at times doing a lot of that loftier, like attitudinal or behavioral research, where it's like, in the past we've talked about people's comprehension of fair trade, right? Fair trade alone is something that, like, there's layers to it and how it actually functions and what its benefits are. And there's a lot of assumption around it. And so getting into the weeds of like, do people understand it? Do they care? Does it motivate them to change their behavior? It's a pairing of like that qualitative research, qualitative feedback, and then of course there's a lot of metrics involved where we try to triangulate it all to tell a narrative, right? Like, and it's important at Patagonia for it to be a narrative and not a chart, because people respond a lot more to story than just hard metrics all the time. So it's like a layering of 2.
I think it's going to be a fascinating contrast when we hear from Fons later about doing the massive quantitative stuff at scale in huge numbers, and here you are with a team of 4.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask as well about the team of 4 thing. So have you ever worked somewhere on a much larger team?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to know about the context, because it seems to me that in some ways you're lucky on a team of 4 because you have to be a jack of all trades, and if you're a curious person who loves to try different things, great. But if you're working in a large organization, they generally don't encourage you to step outside your box, to be curious, to try new things. You're supposed to climb the ladder by specializing.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm not at those places.
Okay.
I was there. I worked at a footwear company that probably everybody here has heard of. I also did some contracting work for a couple years at Apple. And those were very contrasting experiences in that they were design oriented, incredibly so. But it's what part of design, right? Is it the make it cool, side, or the make it super technologically sound side. And now to me, it's like a good example that I would share is that among my team of 4, it's like I come from a world that was more traditional graphic design. My partners on my team, Manu, he comes from physical design world. He studied at Stanford, made physical products, converted over to UX. Another person on my team, Sarah, comes from the photography world, came into UX, came into design. Chelsea on our team, his newest, she came from Lee Jeans, where she was designing jeans. So there's a lot, we're trying to encourage a lot of that, like what are the foundations of Patagonia? It's product design, storytelling, and a little bit of that under one tight room.
I mean, nobody, I assume, has the job title user researcher, yet it sounds like you do user research.
Yes.
It's less about the job titles, more about the
exactly
actions.
And I would say like a team of 4 is like our direct team. We have like teams we partner with, like category designers who are really, well versed in the sport and the brand and the connection to those communities, because that's also an important way to sort of like grow that influence. And so they're specialists. We have a whole stories team, we have a whole editorial side, photographers.
Yeah, it takes all sorts to make a world. So you're a generalist, clearly, but if everyone was a generalist, things would get hard.
I think we rely on generalists and specialists, a healthy mix. So.
A healthy mix. Do we have any other questions? Yes, we got one over here. Keep your hand up just so we can get the microphone to you. Great.
Hi, thank you. I just want to take you back to your life before Patagonia. For most people in this room, that's probably what design today looks like, so brands that aren't Patagonia. What do you think the responsibility is for designers in those types of businesses today? Because we're not going to get 100 Patagonias starting up tomorrow. Maybe in 10 years' time, there'll be more brands that have that as a focus. But what does design for planet look like for designers today?
That's a really big, important question. I'll try my best to answer that. It's a good one. I think an interesting way is that we have all these tools at our disposal now where we can uncover certain or other areas of feedback or consideration that are tied to like imagination. Like, what if we did this? What if we tried this alternatively? What if we tried to measure a different kind of metric that wasn't necessarily conversion or sales based and was more about someone's personal experience? So like satisfaction, like there's like ways to measure that, or like comprehension. And I think it's like bringing in, I've learned that metrics and hard proof go a long way versus anecdotal. I think it's a nice way to layer it in, but proposing new ways or new types of measurement or new questions is always like, for me, it's always been welcomed. Even if it's been awkward, it's been welcomed to sort of like make proposals on those kind of things. Like, I would say we're not doing everything we could do still. Like, there's a lot more that we could do. But I would agree, like, in a life previous to Patagonia, like, you're drowned out from the seat at that table. Yeah. And so it does take building consensus through, we call it at work, we call it plant the seed. Like, there's a lot of unofficial work that happens where it's conversational. And so if you can somehow create a more conversational space to bring these ideas where it's safe and maybe a little more like you're creating a bit of the community around it, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, I mean, but there's still only so much you can do around that table. And talking about solving the problems at the right scale, I mean, the structure of companies, there are alternatives to shareholder value, B corporations.
Yes.
That's maybe going to have the long-term impact. We're running out of time, so just got one last quick question for you, Levon. Is there such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism? It's a yes or no question.
You asked me about nuclear power. Ethical
Is
consumption.
there such thing as ethical consumption under capitalism? Come on, we've all thought it.
No.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Levon Sharrow.